If you found this podcast, chances are you're a high achiever and you're successful. But now you're stuck and stressed, and you realize that everything you've created hasn't given you the fulfillment and the joy you thought it would. This is where we discuss the keys of high performance mindset and stepping into the next best version of yourself. Welcome to the Positive Persistence Podcast. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Positive Persistence Podcast. Today we're joined by an incredible woman who I've had the pleasure to have an awesome conversation with on her podcast, The Motion of Gratitude. And since then, I've been looking forward to having her on this show to talk about living a life of intention, presence, and profound gratitude. Shannon Missimer, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ian. It's so nice to be here. I'm excited for this conversation.
Me too. So I know that kind of a lot has happened since the last time we chatted, but I really want to talk to you today about gratitude. And I think that there's some demystifying that needs to happen around the word gratitude, because I think that when that word gets used, when people talk about having a gratitude journal, or they talk about meditating and using gratitude as a part of that, it seems to get lost in the world of, and I'm throwing up air quotes here, foo-foo.
Yeah.
Right.
The woo. We're stuck in the woo.
Yes. So let's talk about that. I hope we can unpack some of that.
Yes, let's do it.
And I want to launch in with this question of, what is gratitude to you?
Yes.
And why is it important?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I fell into the category too of thinking that, doing that kind of work was woo, right? This wasn't the path that I saw myself really going on, right, when this all started. And, to me, gratitude, intentional gratitude, and we can talk about that too. But I think for me, what intentional gratitude is, it's allowing yourself to really connect to the present and see what is going right in your life, even when you're in the really, really hard.
Yeah.
And that was, for me, in the season of my life where I felt so deep in the hard, gratitude was the one thing that I could reach for. And it became, this catalyst for seeing life so differently. So that's really, for me, the definition of it. And I think, it gets lost in this idea of, gratitude, something we should be doing. We've all been taught, you got to say thank you, and you got to, say thank you to your grandmother, or, say thank you for the gift. So I think we all think that that's the depth of gratitude. But for me, it's just expanded into layers of different connection and appreciation for what gratitude is actually as a tool that we can use in our life to really be in these seasons that, can feel like we have nothing to reach for. Yeah.
I want to touch on something you mentioned that made me think of, I think the most common way that most people think about gratitude is you're giving thanks, or you are reciprocating the feeling of receiving something physically.
Yes.
And you're taught to show gratitude by saying thank you, right? For something that has tangibly happened.
Yes.
But I think
it's a reaction.
Yes. Right. So I think it's a little bit of a mind flip for people to think about being gracious proactively
100%.
for something that hasn't happened already.
Yes. That was definitely a huge shift for me. Like, I always saw gratitude as a response, right? It's like you have to wait for things to happen in your life to feel gratitude. And I think we can all relate to that, right? It's like we know that moment when we feel that true sense of gratitude when something externally outside of ourselves happens, and we feel this sense of, it can feel different for everybody, but this peace and calm, or just connection to the presence. And so for me, that was this aha where it's like, I don't have to wait for something to happen externally outside of myself. I get to create this every single day intentionally to feel this feeling and see what then that creates in my life. And that was like that was that aha moment of like, why are we not talking about this more often? Like, why is this not, really shared in the depth of what it can be?
Right. Well, let's talk about how you came to this realization.
Yes.
Can you give us kind of the behind the scenes of where Shannon was in
Absolutely.
life before you started to have this epiphany, if you will?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, this was a journey that started for me 7 years ago. So, at the time, I was a stay-at-home mom. So before having kids, I was as type A as you could get, right? I graduated college early because I was like, it's time to make money, right? I don't need to be here. I'm wasting time. It's time to get a real job. It's time to make
Yeah.
money, and it's time to go, go, go. I spent my 20s in sales and, really just doing all of the things that everybody told me was going to make
Mhm.
me happy, right? It's like
Right.
if there was one person there that I felt like knew a little bit more than me, if they're like, that's the career path for you, that's the one I took, right? It was like, okay, follow what everybody says and kind of go on this path. And, it was working for my 20s, right? I as a 20, in my mid 20s, I had a great career and I was on this trajectory. But something switched once I realized that I wanted to have a family. There was something in me that said, you're meant to be home and you're meant to raise your babies. And so I said, okay, this is the season that I'm going to really allow myself to be present. So our first baby really allowed me to stay in that type A, right? She was a trick baby. She led me to believe I could parent anything, right? So
Yeah.
I kept her on the schedule. She was in bed by 7:30. We had tub time at 6:30 every night. Her nap schedule was like to a T. So I was like, oh my God, this is so easy. I've got this. I
Right.
got
You
to
were
keep,
dialed in.
yeah, I was like, I get to keep that type A, like control, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so after our first, I was like, oh, awesome, this is great. We're going to stay in this rhythm. And, when our second child got here, she just had different plans for what life was going to look like for us. From day one, she just had a sensitivity to life that was so different from our first. And,
Mhm.
she was, no matter what was going on in her life, she had this piercing cry that, like, people talk about, you can differentiate your baby's cries by if they're hungry or if they're tired.
Yeah.
No matter what it was, there was this piercing shriek cry that hit you right kind of in the core. You know, and nobody could really comfort her except for mom, right? So it was this season of, from day one, she wouldn't take a bottle, so she was always nursing. She had acid reflux. When you laid her down, she would scream, and there was just such an intensity of the season,
Yeah.
and it just hit every part of me. And as a mom, it's like you give everything you have to these babies, right? And you're like, okay, I'm just going to keep giving. I'm going to keep giving. I'm going to keep giving. And then I got to a point where I was like, I am so numb and I am just a complete shell of the person that I knew that I'm capable of being. And it's like,
Mhm.
I'm not serving anybody. Like I have nothing left. If I had, I was probably in a state of postpartum depression. Like there was so much sadness. And, all I could see in that season was everything that was going wrong, right? It was like, I got no sleep. My cortisol's through the roof. Like I'm not getting out to exercise. Like everything was just stacking in this direction of, seeing all of the things that were going wrong. And I remember my husband came home from work one day and I was just doing the daily dump of like, this went wrong and this went wrong and this went wrong.
Yeah.
And he looks at me and you could tell he's like searching for those words of like, oh, how can I say this in a way that's like going to be kind of okay, but going to still make a point. And
Right.
he was like, Shannon, you're going to have to learn to be more grateful. And I was like, really? Like, that's what you choose to say to me today? Like, I'm giving all I got to these kids. Like, really? Like, so it took some time. Like, I was like, I don't have anything nice to say, so I'm going to walk away,
Yeah. Right.
But so it took some time, but it was one of those things, like when somebody says something to you sometimes and it just sticks. Like, there's those times where you're like, why am I so upset? Like, why is this sticking with me so deeply? And,
Yes, because it's true, right? But you don't want to
exactly.
admit it to yourself.
Exactly. So
You
at
wanna
first
still
I'm
be
like,
mad.
yeah,
Yeah.
first I'm like, you don't know me. Like you don't know anything about me, even though we've been married for,
Right.
5 years at that point. You get that
Right.
defensive like backup of like, no, I am grateful. I'm telling people I'm grateful. I'm
Mhm.
doing that. Like, I'm so grateful to be in motherhood, when anybody asks, right? I'm playing all the parts.
Yeah.
But I just remember it stuck with me. And after about a week of really sitting with it, I was like, oh my God, he's so right. Like, we have worked so hard to be in this season, right? It's like, and there are still even, yes, this is such an intense time. I've never experienced anything like this in my life. Like, I've never given so much time and attention to another human being. And look at all of the other things that are still going right. Like, we have two beautiful babies. Like, we had worked so hard to be in this home that we were in. I was happily married, like there were so many things. And I was like, it just got to a point where it was like, I don't want to look back in 10 years and miss it. Like, I don't want to miss this season. And I really had to wrestle with like, okay, are you going to stay here and raise the kids? And it's like, yes, if I'm not going to change my external environment, the only thing I can control is how I'm feeling inside. And no one can do that work for me. Like, I'm the only one. No one's coming. So once I got to that point, it's like, it was knowing that I was in a season where I couldn't go to a retreat for a week. Like, I couldn't go to a motivational seminar and be like, okay, I'm feeling like that wasn't the season I was in. So it was like, what can I reach for every single day that will help me to step back into that space of finding the good. And so I said, okay, I'm going to just get really intentional with my gratitude practice. And I started waking up before the kids, which I wasn't doing. I started intentionally starting my day on my own terms. And I started every single day with gratitude. And it was like 2 weeks into this practice. And I was like, what is happening? I was like, I'm laughing at the things that were making me cry. I'm like walking into spaces and hearing, the same emotions that, before. And I was like, I can handle this. Like, I've got this. And I was seeing things from such a different perspective. And as I started to feel this shift, and, from there, I wanted to learn to actually be more present, to experience more gratitude. But it was just this catalyst and shift in my life. And it's like, there's so much beauty that comes when we allow ourselves that shift in perspective to really see life differently. And that was that moment of knowing that there's kind of like that before and after that happens in your life, right? Where it's like you kind of see life different from that point forward. And, it became the catalyst of, how I parent, how I show up for myself, how I am in my marriage, how we've chosen to raise our kids and just be on this journey of life. And it's just been beautiful to see how life has unfolded. Again, not all sunshine and roses, right? But it's continued to unfold in this way that I know if I wasn't showing up intentionally from this place, it would be very, very different.
For somebody who is listening to this or watching this and they're thinking about, okay, well, I want that. I want to have that in my life, but I don't how do I start a gratitude practice? Like, what are some, I guess, easy, maybe even we'll call them beginner steps that somebody could take to, or let's just go back to your life and use it as an example. Like those first couple of days when you first decided to be intentional about having a gratitude practice, what were some of the things that you were grateful for? Like, what are some of the things that you started thinking about?
Yeah. I remember the first day, like I can still go back to that first day where it's like you're getting up, even if it's 5 minutes before the kids, right? Because I had this goal of having a half hour to myself. But day one, I was like, we're not going all or nothing here, because this is how you fall out of this rhythm. So it's like, set an alarm for 5 minutes before the earliest time that our youngest was waking up. So it was like, give yourself that space, and even just allowing myself for my feet to hit the ground on my own time, right? Not being jolted out of bed and the cortisol shooting through the roof, feeling like I'm being chased by a bear. Like even that one intentional step that day was like, oh my gosh, this already feels so different. And then I remember sitting in this space with my journal and my mind for the first couple minutes being like, there's nothing. Like, go do something else. Like, there's nothing here. And it's like, nope. Come back, stay here, like sit in this moment and give yourself the time to actually look at what is going right in your life. And it was just sitting in that wrestle of like acknowledging that things are hard and then saying, okay, and like, let's live in this place of and what's still going right. And so it almost took that wrestle and then the process of actually writing it down and saying, I'm grateful that I got this 5 minutes. I'm grateful that I have a moment to breathe before I do go into mom mode. And, I remember writing at the beginning too. It's like, I come back to this one a lot, but I remember writing like, I'm thankful for gravity, because imagine how freaking hard this day would be if I was like floating through the air, right? It's like just seeing like my feet are firmly planted on the ground. I can get to this next place. So like, thank you for this moment of gravity so I can, actually show up in these spaces. And it then became like, actually sitting and allowing yourself to go in those spaces, it lightens you up a bit, right? Because you're like, really? That's what you can find today? Gravity? So it almost creates this, new circuit. And I think that's what has been so cool for me, is to see the science of it, that I know you understand too, of like what happens when you allow yourself to sit in those spaces of the positive, of the gratitude.
Mhm.
But I will say that's actually the whole reason why the motion of gratitude got started, because for me, I was finding that there's a lot of people that were talking about gratitude and like how you need to have a practice. But when it came to the how, it was really difficult to find, and especially a starting point. And so that is what really the motion of gratitude became. It was we've created a 28-day gratitude initiative for the beginner who's like, I know I want to do this, but I don't know where to start. And really
Yeah.
setting those 4 weeks of how to be intentional with gratitude, how to learn to actually be present in your life to experience it. So that was really the catalyst of looking back on my own experience and saying, okay, what was so helpful for me that I feel like is being missed, right, in a lot of the conversations that are being had. And so that's where that experience really spurred, exactly where it spurred from. So
Yeah. That's awesome. And so, as you mentioned, the 28-day gratitude practice is, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's kind of like the wheelhouse of the motion of gratitude, your
Yes.
business that you co-own with your husband.
Yes.
But you have some really cool certifications, which are also part of the motion of
Yes.
gratitude. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about being a master level mindfulness practitioner and
Yes.
a breathwork facilitator. Because
Yes.
again, for people who may be listening or watching this that aren't familiar with those types of modalities or practices, they may hear those titles and like, what is that? Here we are again in the land of, throwing out those air quotes, woo
Exactly.
woo, right?
Exactly.
Because people don't understand, they just haven't been exposed to it.
Absolutely.
And I am so thankful for having this conversation with you,
Yes.
so you can enlighten more people on what that is and why it's important and how it can be so beneficial.
Absolutely. Yeah. So like when I started with my gratitude practice, it wasn't from this place of spiritual connection. It was like, I'm so anxious and overwhelmed. I need a tool. And all the things that I'm hearing are working aren't working. Like I was in great physical shape. I was taking care of my physical body. I was eating well. I was doing all those things. And yet I still needed something that actually allowed me to connect internally. And that's where I have loved kind of exploring the science and the pieces of that. So what happened is, as I really started this gratitude practice, I realized that I didn't really understand what it meant to be present in my life. So I was that person who was and growing up, my dad always said to me, be here now, boo boo, because he called me boo boo. And he was like, be here now. Be here. And I'm like, I am here. I'm physically here. Like, I'm here. But like, what are we doing for lunch? Or like, where are we going next? And what's all this thing? And I was always trying to understand the next step, almost to be able to control it to some degree, to be able to feel safe, right? So once I started to gratitude journal and my nervous system started to calm down, which I didn't know this was happening back then. This has only been through, wanting to understand it deeper. Once I started to take my nervous system out of that sympathetic state, allow it to drop into the parasympathetic, to feel safe in the present moment, it was like, wow, there's so much life happening right now that I'm missing because my mind is somewhere else. So it's like, how can I actually learn to be exactly where my feet are? I was somebody at the time, I had tried meditation, right? Everybody's like, you just have to meditate. I was like, all right, fine. So Matt and I went to this meditation class at our gym, and it was like this hour-long meditation, and it was us, and I say this with love, but there was like an older population, right? It was like us and the 70-year-olds, right? And we're like, all right. And then So the guy who's leading the meditation goes like very deep, really quick, and like deep spiritual. I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I can't connect to this. And then the guy next to me is snoring. And I was like, are we here for a nap? Like, I was like, I'm done. Like, this is not working. Like, my mind's crazy. None of this is working. So I had kind of chalked up meditation that like, that's what it was. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing it. But as I started to actually calm the nervous system and learn to settle into the present, that meditation was the tool for me to go deeper into that present and deeper into understanding my internal landscape of what is actually running the show in my life. Like, what are the stories that are having me make the decisions that I'm making?
Yes,
And
right.
so it just became this. I allowed myself to kind of take the pressure off of like meditation's supposed to be this place where, we end up in this Zen zone all of the time. And I just allowed myself to actually connect with myself, get out of my head and actually drop into what I'm feeling in my physical body and start to have that connection again, because it was almost like I had to relearn, right? And so it was this beautiful space to every day just connect back in with myself and start to feel what it actually feels like to be present and to feel connected within. So it was, starting to explore that. I'm the type of person that when something hits, I'm like, I got to understand the science of this. I have to know like all of the details, right? I'm such a rabbit holer. And so I started to really dive into the science, obviously the science of gratitude, and then the science of mindfulness. And it's like, there's a reason why people have been doing this for thousands of years. Like this isn't new, right? Sometimes we're like, it's so new age, but it's not. It's been happening for thousands of years. And so once I started to dive into this, I knew that I wanted to share these tools with other people. And I also know that it is such a personal journey that I wanted to make sure that I understood on a deeper level beyond my own experience what mindfulness can be for somebody and what it is meant to be in our life. So that's where I went down the route of getting certified in like the master level mindfulness and really diving into those pieces. But I would say the biggest aha for me was the connection to our breath. And that is what led me down the breath work, really the direction of becoming a breathwork facilitator.
Yeah.
Because it's funny. I feel like I'm drawn so deeply to the tools that are really something that you don't need outside of yourself, right? It's like your breath and gratitude, right? It's like as a mother in that season of knowing that there were not things that I could reach for outside of myself. It's like, what is it that I can find that can allow me to really connect in, to get clarity, to be able to show up and make the decisions that I want to make? So breathwork has been a whole beautiful experience for myself personally, in learning that our breath is our gateway to our nervous system. It is literally if you think about it, it is so your breath is the only way you can really access. So you have your autonomic nervous system, right? So the beautiful thing about your breath is it happens automatically, which is a gift. So that way we're not worrying about breathing in the middle of the night. But I think so many of us can think about our breath in the moments of anxiousness and how our breath is the first thing that goes, right? It gets shallow and our chest gets really tight. But we don't realize that we can use our breath to actually alter our state from that sympathetic into the parasympathetic. And that's just been an incredible journey to explore that for myself and now be able to share it on a deeper level with other people.
I love how you're talking about like intrinsic things that we have control over.
Yes.
That really allow us to start to make life happen for us.
Yes.
Instead of having life happen to us.
Yes.
Because you said multiple times now that there were all these tools externally for you to use, but they weren't working.
Yep.
So then I find that, people get stuck.
Yes.
And it's like, well, what else am I supposed to do? Not realizing that they have everything that they need already.
Yes. Yes.
But don't typically know how to access it or don't even know how they can.
Yes. Exactly.
And so I think, when you're talking about accessing your breath, and I think this is also something that you talk about is intentional alignment.
Yes.
And I was hoping you could kind of unpack that phrase for us. What does intentional alignment mean for you? It's time to ask yourself, when was the last time you prioritized you? Did you know that research shows that nearly 85% of high performers struggle to maintain a performance mindset while juggling the demands of work and personal life? Those who actively prioritize their performance mindset and personal growth are 30% more likely to achieve their goals in business and life. If you're feeling crippling stress and anxiety, or if you're feeling guilty when you take a moment for yourself, or if you're stuck in the grind and feeling burnt out, you're not alone. Many of us yearn for more, but struggle with the fear of being judged or feeling selfish. And you want to step into the next best version of yourself. That's why I created the Rinse Method, which got me from paraplegic to marathon runner. Backed by science-based proven strategies and now customized for high performers like you. If you're stuck and stressed and want clear steps that you can implement today to move forward, make sure you visit thepositivepersistence.com to download our free Rinse PDF.
Yeah. So for me, when I think about the word intention, right? Because I think when we think about gratitude, like we were talking about, it's like, it's this process of, even some people go through the motions of a gratitude practice, right? It's like, okay, I know I'm supposed to write these things, so I'm just going to write it. Yeah. The difference with the intention piece of it is really allowing yourself to sit in the emotion and the connection to what you're actually writing and experiencing. And to me, that's been the biggest difference, right? And it's through that intentional practice of it that you are creating those shifts within inside of yourself to truly, connect deeper to the feeling and the experience of gratitude. And that has really been the big thing for me. Truly is the intention piece, because I find that even when I kind of go through the motions of my practice, it becomes a checkbox, right? And if we don't have that intentional piece, then we miss out on the benefits of what the practice is actually meant to do. And when you talk about alignment, there's no way to get into alignment if you don't understand internally, you don't have that connection point. Because what are you aligning to? You're aligning to something outside of yourself if you don't have that clear guidance within to say, yes, this is for you. This is the path for you. So it's if we're not creating those entry points into that internal landscape, then it's so difficult to really live a life of alignment. Because, I think about before I had these practices, I was taking advice from any mom who had a pulse on the internet. Right? It's like, you're a mom. What are you doing? What are you doing? Right? And it's like, I need to hear all your things. And then you're exhausted, you're burnt out, and nothing is working. So it's like, when you get to that place of intentional alignment, you start to have discernment over, okay, what is it that is happening in my life that I am looking for support in? Or so that connection to yourself first then allows you to say, okay, this is where I need help, or this is where I need true support that I know I can either bring somebody in or find that solution for yourself. So that's really been the biggest shift with the intention for me.
That's awesome. I love how you're talking about finding out what works for you. Exactly. And I love the fact that you talked about the checkbox, because I think that people they fall in love with the thought of meditation, or they fall in love with the thought of a gratitude practice. And then, like you said, they do it. They say, okay, I got to write something out for today. And I just, I ran done.
Yes.
Check.
Yes.
But there isn't any intention behind what they're writing. And like you said, taking the time to have that, we both know what Ben Newman calls intentional focus.
Yes.
And like you said, sitting in it and actually feeling it and connecting to what you're either thinking or writing or experiencing in that moment. Because I know for me, I have a meditation practice, and there's some times where I am just going through the motions of that practice.
Yes.
But what I like to think anyway, Shannon, is that by doing it every day, that even on the days or the times within that meditation practice where I'm kind of just going through the motions, that is going to, like you said, give me some insight, maybe not that day, but by going through that practice, I'll have that familiarity So then maybe it's next week, or maybe it's a month from now, or maybe it's a year from now when I'm doing that same practice, but something else kind of falls into place.
Yes.
Because I've done it so many times.
Yes.
That there's there's a neural pathway just waiting to kind of click into place.
Yes.
So I guess what I'm saying is like, it is okay to quote unquote go through the motions sometimes, just to lay that energetic groundwork, if you will.
Yes.
To allow for, that aha moment to happen.
Yes. I think what was the big thing for me is, because I 100% agree with you. And I think what happens is if we don't allow that, it's like even with physical exercise or with nutrition, right? There's something about that first initial connection point and intentional focus to start to understand why you're doing it to begin with, right? So like if you exercise one day and then you don't exercise for a week, and then you're like, all right, I'll go really hard at the gym today, so hard that I can't work out for a week. Like when you start a new practice or something like that, you don't get to actually feel the benefit of it, and you walk away, right? And I think that's what happens so much with gratitude and the practice of it, because people, they'll do it for like one day, and then they won't do it. And then it just becomes like, well, it's not working for me, right? Yeah. And it's only through that intentional consistency, at least for me, what I found, like initially, it's like anything else. It's connecting to what it's actually doing. So in those moments of the really hard, like there's a lot of days where I'm like, I don't want to journal today, but it's like, because I was so intentional with it when I started and I know how impactful it is, that's why I'm showing up today. Like that's why I'm doing it on the days where I do feel like I'm going through the motions, but I know what it is doing in the background of my life to continue to show up. And I think that's the piece that gets missed with gratitude. And I find it, like you're saying, like there's all these great planners out there right now. And it's like, your gratitude, your water, your, all this stuff. And it gets lumped in with everything else. And it's like, yes. And like, if you do not have that intentional understanding of what it is doing in your life to start, that's just going to be like something that you have on your list that you have to keep doing. So I think that's really been what I find myself coming back to in those moments. And 7 years later, it's still something that I do. It's not like I wake up every day and I'm like, I am so ready for my gratitude practice. But it's like, remember what it did for you last week? And oh, by the way, remember the day you missed and how off your day was? So it's allowing yourself to look back and connect to those moments and see like, okay, this is what it's doing for me. And one thing that has been such an aha as I've really started to dive into the science of it is like I think one of the things that's so powerful about gratitude is your mind doesn't really know the difference between a story and reality, right? So if you're telling your mind the story of all that you're grateful for, it's going to believe that that's your reality. And through the filter of your, if you get into the mind and thinking about the reticular activating system is the filter of the mind. So if you're telling that filter, look, I'm starting my day with things I'm grateful for. It's your job to look for more. Your day is going to go completely different than the days where you wake up and you start with stress or you start with overwhelm. So it's that process of saying, this is what I want you to filter into my mind today. And that then creates momentum to the day where you might see things that were happening all along, but you missed them because of what the filter was looking for. Because it's your brain's job to keep you alive. And a lot of the time that just involves survival. It doesn't involve stopping and seeing, the beautiful things that are happening around you. So I think that's some of the fun science for all the, when it can get stuck in that woo world, right? It's like, there's so much beautiful science that we can now understand from the neuroscience perspective. And that's something that I come back to, and it is helpful for me on those moments where I'm like, okay, what am I going to write today? And I get stuck. It's like, what are you filtering in today? Like, what is your focus?
That makes me think of actually two questions that I want to ask you then. Boiled down to its simplest form, and maybe I'm off with this, but is gratitude, I should say, I was going to say simple, which it is, but it's not easy.
Yes.
Boiled down to a simplest element, is it just taking the time to notice the things that are going right in your life and being grateful for them? And then also having that gratitude practice in the morning setting yourself up to notice those things.
Yes.
Is it as beneficial to also do this maybe at night before you go to bed and kind of setting your reticular activating system to go wild in your subconscious while you sleep?
Yes. Yes. All of it.
Yes. Okay.
Yes. The answer is yes. Yes. And, you know, I had a thought that came up during the first part of your question there. And I think in the world that we live in, right? If you think about the information that's being taken in, whether intentionally or not, you are taking in so much negative almost all day, right?
Yeah.
Even if you are following all these positive people on Instagram, there's going to be an ad that's going to pop up and it's going to remind you of all of these things that you should be scared about, right? I do meditations on YouTube sometimes, and at the end, there's like a fear-mongering commercial right when I've gotten out of this like peaceful calm, right? So if we are not in this time of life intentionally focusing on what's going right, all you are seeing is what is going wrong or things that you have to be on high alert for. And when you are in that state of high alert, you are stuck in your sympathetic nervous system, which is operating from your amygdala part of your brain. That is the reptilian part that's there to keep you alive. And it's like, that's a threat, that's a threat, that's a threat. And then your nervous system is stuck in this state of fight, flight, fear, fawn, all the things.
All the
and
F's.
Yes. And then we don't actually allow our body to work the way that it's meant to, right? Because when we are in that state, everything shuts off, right? All of the systems that are meant to keep us functioning, keep us healthy, keep us happy, they shut off.
Right.
And in the world that we live in, you have to intentionally turn it back on. And that's where gratitude is such a beautiful way in which to do that when you allow yourself to actually sit in the feelings of it. So yes, there's been so much research around first thing in the morning, how powerful that time is before the world kicks into overdrive, before you have responsibilities outside of your little bubble. That is your time. So there's so much that you can do that is actually shown to have a even stronger impact in, that connection in your neural pathways. So not saying that you're not going to get the benefits if you decide to do it later in the day, but there's something so impactful. That's why everybody talks about your morning routine, right? Because there's something so impactful that happens first thing in the morning that literally you're in a different brain state. So you are more of a sponge and kind of taking things in. That's why everybody's talking about the morning routine, because it is that important.
Yeah.
And then the nighttime, to your point, yes, if we can find time before we go to bed, instead of scrolling our phones, instead of, again, watching the news or hearing everybody's noise outside of your own, you are going to have such a different experience. And yes, you will sleep better. Your body will be able to calm and center. So there's so much that can really come from bookending the days.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, why not?
Yes.
Right? We already know what'll happen if you don't.
Yes.
Why not happen? Why not find out what happens if you do?
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, that is like a perfect segue into more information on how to do this, how to start a gratitude practice, or how to find ways to be more present so you can have the motion of gratitude. So if you would tell us where we can find out more about you and more about the motion of gratitude, where you can find your podcast and more about your breathwork sessions and workshops and retreats and all those great things.
Thank you. Yes. So as I shared with the experience, that has really been the space in which, it's truly resetting that foundation. And that has been in this space of gratitude. If you are like, I know that what I'm doing isn't working, and I want to set this new foundation in how I start my day and in how I bookend my day. We wanted to create that space in which you could really be so intentional and show up and start to feel for yourself what these practices are doing. So it's meant to be an introduction to gratitude, an introduction to presence, which is mindfulness and breathwork, because I know it can be so overwhelming from me personally, having my own experience with where do I start, right?
Yeah.
How do I even have that introductory connection to my breaths, to practices that, feel like I can actually connect to them without it feeling so overwhelming.
Right.
So really that introduction to gratitude, to presence, and just creating that intentional habit. So you can find out more about our 28-day gratitude initiative at The Motion of Gratitude. So the website is themotionofgratitude.com. And yeah, it's just been such a fun journey. When it started, it was like, how can I help the mamas? Like in the moment, how can I help them? And that's really where it started. And then, as I started to share it with people outside of that motherhood season, they're like, I needed this too. And it's like, okay, all right. So we just have continued to kind of expand. And 2 years ago, my husband joined in the business and got out of the financial services industry. And now we're really building this together. And so he does a lot of work with, organizations that are looking to bring gratitude into their culture. And the one thing that's been on my heart as a mom is we've now created workbooks to support students in the school setting. Because I think if I understood this, and I know if kids in the world that they're growing up in right now, the level of disconnection that they are kind of put into it, from technology and just all of the go, go, go. It's like, how can we help empower them to connect back with themselves and understand that these are tools that they can reach for? So we wanted to create something that was a similar 4-week experience for them that actually mirrors the 28-day. So parents can do it with their kids or teachers can do it with their students. So it's really an experience of everybody together.
Yeah.
So we were excited to roll that out this year. And yes, so the breath work is something I've been doing it locally recently with classes and really supporting people in person. And through that, there's been a big request to how can I do this virtually, right? Because not all breathwork classes have to be an hour. So much of these tools you can reach. So I am in the process of building out a community space for people to just understand the science of breathwork, to have community around breathwork, because I think when you start to go on these journeys, what I have found is it can be really lonely when you start to kind of explore different modalities. And it can feel like sometimes you kind of get tossed into an app, but you don't have a human that you can actually ask questions to. So I wanted a space where it's actually me and a community interacting, and then also have, some live classes and some recordings of things too, so you can refer back to it. So that's being built out. So all that information will be on the Motion of Gratitude site as well, because I'm really excited to be able to have a space to be more in community with people, even if we can't all, be together in a live location. So I believe that's actually going to go up this week. So I've been working hard behind the scenes on that. Yeah. So I'm really excited about that piece. But yeah, that will all be on the Motion of Gratitude site as well once that's live.
Awesome. Well, Shannon, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out and talking to us about the Motion of Gratitude and the importance of it, how we can utilize it. And I hope that at least one person got something out of this conversation to where they feel more comfortable with starting their own gratitude journey. So again, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of our listeners and all of our viewers for tuning in and remembering to stay positive, stay persistent, and that we always know mindset is everything. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in and being part of the Positive Persistence family. We're having a great time creating this content, and we truly hope it inspires you to embrace positivity and persistence in your own journey. If this podcast episode inspired you or entertained you, scroll down, hit those stars, and leave a comment or two. Your 5-star reviews and shares encourage us and help us grow the show. So until next time, stay positive, stay persistent, and remember, mindset is everything.